to make a tournament from scratch in just 6 months. With no plan, no support, no precedence and no money, which then had to take down the biggest media giant in India at the time. That would be the task handed to Lalit Modi on 7th of September 2007. Starting a journey that would blur the boundaries of ethics and law, that would push marketing in India to dizzying new heights, and that would come to hold the world of cricket by its very throat. Today, we learn the story of the tournament that changed cricket forever. Today we learn of the jugaad of IPL. Now the idea of an IPL is neither unique nor new. Going as far back as 1995, many such ideas would be constantly put in front of BCCI. In fact, among the first ones to do so would be Lalit Modi himself. Now yes, it was an ODI tournament, but at its core, it was a city-based, privately owned league. But BCCI, afraid of losing its monopoly, would start playing a game of whack-a-mole, shutting down all such ideas even before they began. And so it would go on all the way up to 2007, when Subhash Chandra, the owner of India's biggest TV channel at the time, angry at once again being refused the broadcasting right for Indian cricket, he would decide to declare war. Indian Cricket League, a privately owned T20 tournament, was announced in a blatant challenge to BCCI hegemony. And though flustered BCCI would try to fight back, threatening to ban the defecting players and increasing domestic salaries, the BCCI president, Sharad Pawar, knew it was just a matter of time before they lost. Their bans wouldn't hold up in court, their increased salaries nowhere near that of Z's, and most importantly, the prime time TV attention that Z was offering was something that they just couldn't compete with. So players had begun to leave them left, right and centre, with rumblings that if nothing changed, then many of the domestic players would just leave en masse. So Pawar, now pushed into a corner, decided to enact a radical plan submitted by his best lieutenant. The lieutenant who had been instrumental in getting him elected, who had increased their revenue by 7-fold in the last 3 years, and whose 10-year-old plan was now to be recycled into a T20 tournament. Lalit Modi and his Indian Premier League were greenlit by Pawar, with the hopes that he could defeat the upstarts in their own game. In the first order of business, without any plan in place, without any funding in hand, hold an unveiling ceremony. If players needed hope, Lalit would do one better. He would give them greed. Not only would he promise guaranteed hefty salaries in the IPL, not only would he increase the prize pot to 3 times that of ICL, but with Sachin, Ganguly and Dravid in attendance, along with the heads of ICC, Australian and South African board, he would portray his tournament as the one having national and international support. But in doing so, he would invariably bring the spotlight on the elephant in the room. The elephant in the form of a simple question that why exactly was the Holy Trinity here, when there was a T20 World Cup happening at that exact moment in South Africa? Now on paper, this was self-repentance for the World Cup debacle. But everyone knew the real reason was that the players, just like their fans, were not interested in T20. At the time, India was a nation of cricket traditionalists above all, and in most Indian eyes, T20 was seen as an insult to cricket itself. In fact, interest in it had been so low that ever since its inception, India had bothered to play just one T20 match. And now out of nowhere, BCCI was making a 44-day long, 59 matches wide T20 abomination. Why? And for whom? Because even with international players being there, this was essentially a domestic tournament. Something that historically had never had any viewership in India. In fact, there were times when the finals of Dilip and Ranji trophies were being played in front of empty crowds. And now you want to bring in international players to show them this sad state of affairs. Why? Especially when they're already complaining of burnout and fatigue. That means bringing them here would require a lot of motivation. Motivation that Lalit didn't have a single penny of. So in short, BCCI had started a tournament that no fan wanted to watch, hence no broadcaster wanted to broadcast, hence no sponsor wanted to sponsor, and hence no player wanted to play. So it wasn't much of a surprise that even the people inside the BCCI were highly doubtful of this idea. Most just saying that Lalit has done so much for us, let him do this, and fall on his face. And who knows, things might have gone that exact same way, if not for what was happening on that very day of that unveiling ceremony 8,000 kilometers away, where India would meet Pakistan in the World Cup group stage, playing out an epic match that ended in a tie, a ball out and an Indian victory, causing Indians for the very first time to stand up and notice this new format. And that notice would get a significant boost when UV did that. Something that Lalit would happen to watch live, standing from the sidelines of that stadium, and he knew at that moment his biggest problem had been taken care of by fate itself. Because after this, even if T20 didn't have an ardent following, at least it won't be taken as a joke anymore. And so, with a newfound hope in his eyes and a spring in his step, Lalit would start his world tour to sell his new idea to all the boards around the world. But by the time he returned, all those hopes would be dashed. As not only did most of the boards just shrug at his idea, but his team sadly informed him no investor was interested in the IPL. In spite of shortlisting 1200 different companies around the world, in spite of contacting them personally, the response they got could be easily surmised into one simple question. What exactly am I buying right now? At the time, franchises in cricket was a very alien concept, and most just couldn't understand that there wasn't anything physical to buy. Moreover, after buying the imaginary team, they would have to spend even more money to buy the players and infrastructure. And all of this while having zero proof that this idea could actually work. So obviously, no investor was interested. Making one thing absolutely clear to Lalit. The traditional method of running a tournament was never gonna work here. The product as it stood now was simply unsellable. And so, Lalit would decide to do something drastic. For the time being, rather than wasting any more time on the investors, he would decide to focus on the broadcasters. Because as he saw it, investors needed financials, precedents, valuations, and who knows what more while making a decision. While broadcasters needed one thing and only one thing while making a decision: public interest. If there was enough public interest, then they wouldn't even mind showing how paint dries 24/7 on their channel. So if he could somehow generate enough public interest around his idea, then maybe, just maybe, he could get one of the broadcasters to invest in him heavily. And then by sharing 80% of that massive broadcasting revenue, surely businesses would be interested in IPL then, wouldn't they? Now, exactly how massive would that revenue have to be to pull this off? Well, according to Lalit, nothing short of $1 billion. Let me put this in perspective. $1 billion for 10 years, that's $1.7 million per match, was nearly the exact same amount that the English Premier League, the biggest football league in the world with over 150 years of history, was getting that very year. And that's not even taking into account that EPL lasts for 8 months, while IPL for 44 days. So the question naturally becomes, what public interest topic was going to be worth $1 billion? Lalit's answer: the great global Indian takeover. India had become the second fastest growing economy in the world, increasingly touted to be the next economic superpower. This boom had seen us go from having just 2 billionaires in 1994 to having more than 40 in 2007. Billionaires that were now going out into the world, buying any business they wanted. From Malia buying a Scottish distillery to Tata's buying a British car company. This reverse colonization of sorts was a source of tremendous pride for Indians, many looking at it as their own personal victory. And Lalit decided to zero in on that exact sentiment. This wasn't just any other tournament, but a homegrown multi-million-dollar tournament that would act as the beacon of India's hopes and aspirations. And by associating with it, you were telling millions of Indians, I stand with you. So basically, Lalit's plan was to turn the very argument against the IPL on its head, selling the idea of Indian glory to generate public interest, using the public interest to get broadcasters to invest, using broadcasters to get owners to invest, using owners to get players to invest, and then using players to get the public invested all over again. To pull this off, he would require a marketing campaign the likes of which India had never seen before. Hence, rather than hiring a tournament manager or a management expert, he would hire Sundar Raman, the head of India's biggest marketing company, to become the chief operating officer of IPL, under whose guidance it would start. Henceforth, whenever IPL would be mentioned in the media, somehow or the other, the topic would deviate towards money. How much money they were gonna make, or which billionaire was to be involved, or how important this was for India. From Russell Crowe to SRK, from Ambanis to Tata. Such was the onslaught of press briefings and rumours that at one point each and every one of our billionaires seemed to have been interested. Day after day, month after month, Lalit, his secretary Radhika, Raman and tournament director Dheeraj would make castles out of air, adding floor after floor, turning dust into gold. But as this would go on, through marketing research, they would be made aware of one simple fact, that nobody in the broadcasting market could actually afford their prices. Zee and his partner Despot had been banned, Nimbus had used up its entire budget, Star ESPN would only agree to conditional bid, and Sony, the broadcaster of 2007 World Cup, had taken such a loss due to India's shock exit that there were rumors they were going to have to sell 1/3 of their stakes just to stay afloat. So all in all, there was a real chance that IPL would not even get even one broadcasting bidders. But Lalit, in spite of all of this, would refuse to back down. His entire plan hinged on getting a very high price year. Yes, maybe he could still make an IPL with a lower price, but it would never be at the scale that Lalit wanted it to be, that he needed it to be to defeat Z. So, rather than compromising, Lalit would decide to double down, announcing that no conditional bid are gonna be accepted, in effect taking ESPN Star out of contention. ESPN Star, that would happen to be one of the only two that would actually submit a bid. Yes, in spite of dozens of companies buying the tender document, only two would actually submit a bid, which along with Star's disqualification would make it a one-horse race, Sony's race. Whatever the bid would go, no matter how small, it would be so. But thankfully, fate and numbers were to be on Lalit's side. Over the past few years, the viewership data in India had taken an interesting turn. Riding on the backs of the economic boom, TVs that were originally concentrated in cities were now slowly spreading into villages. This meant that there was a completely new market opening up for broadcasters, a golden chance to corner the industry. So even though Sony was in a cash crunch, they saw this as the perfect opportunity to catch up to the leaders. But rather than following the heavily abused soap model, they would decide to buy the rights of foreign reality TV shows. The first of which would be the Indian Idol that would shatter all TRP records. So now, when Sony saw the IPL, they didn't see it as a cricketing program, but rather another one of their reality shows, where each episode would be 4 hours long and there would be no dearth of drama, entertainment or thrills. A reality show that they knew how to produce, entertain and succeed with. So in spite of knowing that they were overbidding, in spite of knowing that this could lead to a huge loss, Sony, just like Lalit, would decide to double down, putting forward a bid of $1 billion. Lalit's gamble had paid off. The $1 billion deal was the front page news around the world, and Lalit now had the publicity proof and momentum required to embark on the second step of his plan. The step, a hit list of billionaires. The last few months had made one thing very clear to the team. This tournament wasn't for everyone. There was a very specific kind of businessman that would be interested in this venture. Someone who was either willing to take a risk or at least allowed to. Like people who ran family-owned businesses or ones that didn't have a board to answer to. But more important than even that, it had to be someone that trusted Lalit, who believed in his business smarts and was willing to wager millions on that trust. So, throwing away that list of 1,200 businesses, Lalit would create his own personal shortlist of people whom he thought fit the bill. And based on what those businessmen actually wanted, he would create a tailor-made proposal. For Ness, Wadia and Preeti Zinta, it was a chance to increase their presence. While for Malia, a chance to market his products. For Ambani's, a chance to one-up his brother. While for Shah Rukh, it would be cricketainment. A marriage of cricket and Bollywood, where they both would increase each other's worth, creating a sure shot windfall. And just like this, Lalit would go from city to city, country to country, pitching his perfect plan and building his perfect bait. And yet, after everything was said and done, the answers he would get would be disappointing. Though some like Ambani's and Malia's would be quick to agree, most would refuse to move. Yes, the broadcasting deal was tempting, but it didn't change the litany of other issues that this tournament had. And let's not forget, in the end, this was a BCCI project, whose long anti-business stand had only changed due to outside pressure. So who's to say what they would do once that pressure disappears? So, as the day of the franchise bidding approached, Lalit found himself standing on the edge of a precipice. He had leveraged all of his business interests to get a BCCI project off the ground. If it failed, the owners would just lose a few millions. The BCCI, some of its monopoly. But Lalit risked losing everything. His job, his business, his reputation. So now, pushed into a corner, Lalit would come to a decision. Ethics, consequences, and even the law be damned. He would do what was required. Nothing would be allowed to stand in his way today, even if it may cost him everything tomorrow. And so, in spite of knowing the dangers, Lalit would get his family involved in the bidding. His brother-in-law becoming the future owner of Rajasthan, his childhood friend, the co-owner of KKR, and his son-in-law, the co-owner of Kings 11. In fact, so desperate would Lalit be to make up the numbers that he would even resort to inviting tenders with just a 48 hours deadline, just so that businesses could be pressured into bidding quickly without having time to think about it. And though in the end, it would cause the bids of ICC, DLF and Sahara to be disqualified for being late, everything that he had done had been justified, at least in his own eyes. Cause out of the 90 firms that would buy the $10,000 offer document, only 10 would submit a bid, 3 of which would be from his own family. Now, thankfully, whereas the number of bids would be disappointing, the amount that they bid was anything but. Due to those personalized proposals, the businesses that did so with specific cities in mind. Cities that could facilitate their business goals. And with someone spreading 1,000 rumors about who was gonna bid how much, those businesses would decide to bid aggressively to avoid getting sniped. Hence, in spite of having a $50 million base price, the 8 IPL teams would be sold for a mind-boggling $723 million. And that would be the catalyst. India, already enamored with these billionaires, would quickly reach to a consensus. If people like Ambani and Malia are putting in their millions, then surely there wouldn't be anything wrong with this IPL idea. So all of a sudden, Lalit would go from being a pushy upstart to a genius mastermind. Sony would go from not having any sponsors to not having enough ads. And players who had shown no interest in even T20 by then, would now be lining up to jump on the bandwagon, making the auction to be held in a few days the perfect setting for Lalit's next magic trick. He would declare all teams taking part in the auction have to spend a minimum of $3.5 million. Failing to do which, they would be fined heavily by the IPL. What this did was that players who would have otherwise gone on the base price now had a bidding war going on for them, just so that teams could use up their allotted budgets. And then those inflated prices would once again be used by Lalit to sell the idea of a prosperous India. So all in all, through ways both legal and not so legal, through methods both grey and not so grey, by the time the IPL would actually start, most of India would be desperate to watch the spectacle. And spectacle it would be, as Lalit, true to his idea of cricketainment, would turn the first match into a massive opening ceremony full of dancers, Bollywood stars and exotic shows, even at the cost of the match actually being late. And as Lalit would take the podium, a complete nervous wreck, he maybe couldn't stop himself from looking up at the stars. Everything that he could do had been done. From this point onwards, his career, his tournament, his very fate were now out of his hands. So all he could do was make a silent, nervous prayer to the cricketing gods above, who for once were listening. With an average attendance of 58,000, IPL would draw the second biggest crowds of any tournament anywhere around the world. On top of that, a total of 100 million people would watch it from their home. The cumulative numbers being even higher than the T20 World Cup final. TRP would hold steady at an average of 5% for 44 days straight, creating a record that would bring Sony $650 million in that one season. By the time the finals would be played and Lalit would once again take the podium, it would be for the first time in a very long time that he wouldn't be lying or boasting or even exaggerating when he said IPL is a global representation of India. It is what modern day India stands for. This is a statement from India to the world. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have stuck around till now, here is the funny thing. The legality of the risky moves Lalit had pulled was highly debatable. Hence, they ultimately became a bomb. A bomb that would go off within the next 3 years, destroying Lalit along with everything that he had ever achieved. How that came to be is an interesting story in itself. If any of you are interested in listening to that story, do let me know in the comments. I would love to make a video on it. Till then, thank you for watching. I hope you have a good day.